Meeting to order.
Okay. 1 second, please. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
To the flag of the United States of America
and
and to the republic
for
which it stands,
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everyone. Just want to read a statement from the rules, Massachusetts state law, consistent with Massachusetts open meeting law, MGL chapter 30A, section 20, and regulation 940 CMR 2910, which allows for remote participation in certain circumstances under the Massachusetts open meeting law regulations. The Mendon-Upton Regional School Committee will be conducting this meeting remotely. In this particular case, all 6 members of the committee are participating remotely and virtually through teleconferencing. This is consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 10th, 2020, which eased the requirements of having a meeting in a physical space open to the public and having a quorum of the committee physically present. Any and all votes will be conducted by roll call. Per usual, this meeting will also be live streamed and recorded. With that, let's move on to approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please?
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Okay, very good. It's unanimous. Moving on to motion to approve the open session minutes of April 27th, 2020.
Motion to approve the open session minutes of April 27th, 2020.
Second.
Roll call vote. Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
That's unanimous as well. Another motion to approve the executive session minutes of April 27th.
I move that we approve the executive session minutes of April 27, 2020.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Roll call. Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
And one more motion, please, to approve the open session minutes of May 5th, 2020.
I move that we approve the open session minutes of May 5th, 2020.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote. Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
All right, so that's approved as well. So on we move to, we're switching things up a little bit this agenda. We'll move to community comments. Any comments from the community? Please unmute yourself and raise your hand on the chat so we can find you if you have any comments. Wait just a second more. I don't see any. I don't see any comments. So unless anybody does, let's move on to the superintendent's comments. Joe?
All right, good evening, everybody. First, something that is a piece of good news that we received within the last couple of weeks, that our district has been rewarded the amount of $29,404 through the Massachusetts Safer Schools and Communities Local Equipment and Technology grant opportunity that's offered by the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security Office of Grants and Research through the Executive Office of the Commonwealth. If you recall, we received approximately the same amount about a year ago at this time, which was used to upgrade the camera and security system for Misco Hill Middle School. This same amount will be used to upgrade the camera and security system at Memorial. So we'll now be in a very, very good place as far as just having really a substantially upgraded camera and security system in all 4 of our schools. So I'd like to once again acknowledge the work of Jay Beyer, who wrote and administered every detail of this grant. A little bit of work and attention to detail, but definitely well worth it in upgrading. You know, as I say in my background notes, ironically enough, these were the funds that were made available due to the surplus that was present in the FY19 budget, ironically enough, and the funds were already committed before the pandemic. So again, thanks to Jay for writing and processing this grant. That'll definitely be helpful to our needs. Second piece that I have is just another update on our lunch program. I know over the last couple meetings, I've talked about some of the work that Diane Mucci, our food service director, and her staff have done in kind of reaching out to students and families in need. And I talked about at the last meeting that she's kind of switched gears over the last 3 weeks or so and has kind of been putting together these meal packages that include 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches for a student to be picked up on a weekly basis. About 2 weeks ago, we did an all-call and kind of pushed it out, and I'm pleased to report that just in that 1 week alone, they prepared and served a total of 1,458 meals in total, which would be considered to be 104 of these care packages. Pretty impressive. It dipped a little bit last week to about 87 of the care packages, but again, Diane and her staff are committed to kind of still publicizing this and working with families regardless of free and reduced lunch status to continue this going. So hats off to her on that. And secondly, again, I think I put something in the package. She also went after a grant through the New England Dairy Council, a modest but helpful grant of $1,200 that's going to be awarded to our district, specifically targeted to providing meals and supporting the infrastructure for cafeteria services during this COVID-19 crisis. So the intent is to use that for a lot of the equipment to keep food cool or for transport of food and so on. So again, kudos and congratulations to Diane for pursuing and receiving these funds. Thirdly, as we do every year, and it's per our policy that we need to do this before May 15th, and it's also state law, we have to announce that what we're looking at as far as our school choice openings for next fiscal year. And we do have some, but right now I'd have to say that things are very much in a state of flux. So with that said, usually we look at a couple entry points, kindergarten and then grade 5 and the high school at Nipmuc. And I'll report to you what we have now at Clough Elementary School, 4 openings in kindergarten, 5 for kindergarten Spanish immersion, no openings whatsoever at Memorial Elementary School, and that'll probably stay very much permanent based upon some of our class size projections. Misco Hill Middle School, 2 openings in grade 5, 2 openings in grade 6. And at Nipmuc Regional High School at this point in time, no openings. And again, with that caveat that there's still a great deal of uncertainty with regard to variability that could exist in the budget. But keep in mind, we still have not received any information about BVT's enrollment. So realize that sometimes is a factor that drives the thinking of John and Mary Ann with regard to school choice openings.
Can I ask just a quick question, Joe? Why is that? Or is that normal at this time of year? I thought normally we knew by now.
Yeah, I have not had any communication with Dr. Fitzpatrick or the administration, but I'm assuming it's a delay because of the closure. I don't know, John or Mary Ann, if you have received any explanation from BVT.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sometimes it's just a communication gap in terms of students being accepted. Once they are accepted, they have a period of time to accept that. We don't formally remove them until we receive record requests from the parents. So it's just kind of in that loop, in that process. So we're hopeful to have more updated information in the next day or two, because my understanding is there was some, the second round acceptances also went out. So my guess is they have the information, we just need to get it.
So as I say in my background notes, we may be revisiting some of these pieces by our next meeting on June 1st. And then also per our policy, should there be additional openings due to any type of change of enrollment or some budgetary considerations, as we typically do during the August meeting, that first August meeting, which this year would be August 10th, we would do additional announcements regarding any school choice openings. So again, there's always some variability. There's always some flux with regard to this. However, I think given the set of circumstances that we're in this year, there's another layer to it. So fourth, as far as financial updates and FY21 budget outlook, I think one of the first things that we have to report back that we've talked about is kind of the mandate from DESE that we renegotiate our regular transportation provider. So I'd like to ask Jay to give kind of a thumbnail sketch about a tentative memorandum of agreement that we have in place with regard to Telstone and Son, who is our regular transportation provider. Jay.
So, Joe, I shouldn't do my 48-slide presentation now?
No, a concise description would be good.
Okay. Yeah, so I worked with the business manager at Blackstone Millville, and we also had the business manager from Douglas. Those are the three districts that Telstone provides for. We spent about a month negotiating with them, trying to come up with what we thought was equitable and fair for him, and also equitable and fair for us. It took until last Friday when we finally sort of came to a resolution. We were going to pay them for the remainder of this year, which means from the middle of March through the end of the year, at a 68% of the value of the contract. And they are not going to get paid for any of the field trips, athletic stuff, any of those things that they typically also have as side revenue that they're just going to have to swallow and not get paid for. And then we also negotiated a rate freeze for next year at the same rate that we're paying this year. So the combination of both of those should save us a little bit of money that we can roll in to help offset some of the problems we are anticipating we're going to have next year.
Thank you, Jay. Secondly, again, I think everybody on the committee is up to snuff with regard to the actions that were taken last Tuesday to recertify the budget at a lower amount. Something that is noteworthy in our discussions at the school committee level, but then the week before at the multi-board level, the fact that the operational assessment to our two communities at the recertified amount for Mendon was an increase of 5.39%, which translated to $521,820. And for Upton, an increase of $502,261, or an increase of 4.29%. Some of the initial thinking was based upon some of the initial estimates as far as what could be funded by each community was looking at very, very modest overrides for both communities. However, we were informed, based upon the meeting of the Finance Committee in Upton, that there will not be an override in Upton, or there's not projected to be an override. However, for the town of Mendon, it is projected to be an override of $271,819. So obviously, for the balance to be equal in both communities as far as that increase in local assessment, it's super critical for that modest Mendon override of approximately $272,000 to be successful. Just also, again, I can't stress enough the amount of uncertainty and variability that still exists within the state budget. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, I've got a grand total of 4 meetings to kind of do a deep dive with other superintendents and representatives from the Department of Revenue and also the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to talk about specific budget planning, which I'm sure is going to be going well into the summer. Keep in mind, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit more in depth at the next meeting, if there is some variability or uncertainty, one of the tools that we do have as a regional school district is to go forward with something known as a 1/12 budget, which would basically be, until there's finalization of the state budget, budgeting on a monthly basis with the assumption of flat funding from FY20, from the previous fiscal year. So that's something that, yes, Phil.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ask. But so would that mean that if we go to the 1/12 mechanism, that would mean that essentially we would maintain the current contracts we had from the current fiscal year we're in to the new fiscal year, correct?
I think that would be kind of one of the assumptions based upon the 1/12 budgeting. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm fully anticipating this week, seems like a year, getting some more specific guidance with that.
Yeah. Joe, can I weigh in on this?
Absolutely.
The 1/12 budget is really based just on what we're going to have for revenue, and they'll set. It's mostly for the assessments for the towns and for Chapter 70. I actually have to file paperwork for that before June 1st, so that'll get done regardless. Then whether they enact it, it depends on what happens at the town meetings and the state budget. But I think if they don't have a state budget, we'll be on a 1/12 budget regardless. But the assessments would be, if towns have their town meetings, the assessments to the towns will be whatever's voted.
But that would essentially mean that we have to work within the envelope of the 1/12 budget on a quote-unquote month-to-month basis, correct?
Pretty much, yes, for the revenue side. But keep in mind that we really don't have to start paying a lot of the, say salaries for all of the teachers, paraprofessionals, a lot of those people that work school year. They don't start getting paid till the end of August, beginning of September.
And an interesting piece, Phil, is this is a tool that's been in regulations for years, strictly for regional school districts. Mm-hmm. And specifically when you have a situation where you've got one or more than one town in a regional school district that can't come to consensus, and there's disagreement in what the townspeople have appropriated for the regional school district. But the unique fly in the ointment is the consideration of using this tool on a statewide basis, because there's 331 districts that are in the same boat as us as far as a great deal of uncertainty with regard to the state budget.
Yeah, I know a couple weeks back, I think it was 2 weeks back, Mr. Flaherty and I were on the same call that had John Robinson was his name,
yeah.
Milford. He's like a liaison, but he used to be on the school committee here. And he brought up this whole fact that the state was pushing this because it would allow people to essentially maintain the current budgets they have with the current structures and contracts in place. not changing anything until we get through the budgeting cycle, whatever happens at a state level. So
Sure.
We've been on them in the past. I mean, we were on it in 2011. I think when Joe first started, we were on it in 2015. We had one set up, although the override amendment was approved, I think, on
July 1st or June 30th, right at the wire.
It's not a new process for us.
No.
Quite honestly, I don't see it as that big a deal. It becomes a big deal when you get into October and November.
Well, I think what's interesting is I think that a lot of the other regional schools are not, are looking at the utilization of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they probably may not be as far down the path or, looking at this as proactively as we are, because they're waiting to hear more from the state perspective in terms of what the state is going to do.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
And then last but not least, per usual, you have in your packet the most current year-to-date expenditure report for the FY 2020 operational budget. Jay, is there any specific area or line that you'd like to highlight?
At this point, no, not a whole lot has changed in the 2 weeks since we last spoke. We've had a couple of polar vortexes that have scared me, but we're going to fight them off and ignore them, so I think we're good to go. But other than that, I think everything's pretty much stable.
Okay. And are there any other questions?
I just had a quick question. I think you mentioned in the last meeting, Joe, that there was some talk about like a phase 4 stimulus package. So at this point, is there any specific legislation that we should be like keeping an eye out for and advocating it for, or is it too early for that?
I think, unfortunately, Vicki, it's too early for it. I can say at a statewide level, there's been absolutely no discussion whatsoever. I think unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are kind of holding out hope because so many statewide budgets, and particularly large cities, need to have their FY21 budgets backfilled. But however, if you follow what's happening in the press as far as this is becoming a highly politicized issue, the current administration is also looking for a payroll tax cut that would go with it. So I think this is going to be a wait and see game as we progress through this month and then June, and hopefully it's not going to go as long as July. But there is some talk about, again, this 4th stimulus package that would have a significant chunk to backfill state budgets.
All right, let's move on then. Old business. The search process for the Mercy Director of Student Support Services.
Okay. So as you all know, we're very saddened that our current Director of Student Support Services, Dennis Todd, will be leaving for another opportunity come July 1st. Dennis has done an exemplary job as our Director of Student Support Services, and needless to say, there will be very big shoes to fill. However, in earnest, Maureen has put together a committee to start the search process. And Mo, if you could give us an update this evening about kind of laying out the timeline and the plans.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. And I have to say, the first thing I wrote down I wanted to make sure I said was that we had really big shoes to fill, which you just said the same quote, and we didn't plan that, Dennis. So they are huge, but we are going to put in all our efforts to have the best candidate that we can to move forward and to build on all the successes that you've had over all of these years in our district. So thank you, Dennis, for all of that. We have about 15 people on our committee, and we are representative across all stakeholder groups. And I'm really thrilled. We couldn't have a stronger committee than the one that we have right now. Want to thank Bill for being on the committee as the school committee representative, but we have administrators and teachers teachers, staff, parents, and they're from all buildings. So we have already come up with a great vision and characteristics we're looking for in the position based off of the feedback and surveys that went out to both staff, but also to all of our parents in the district that have offered a number of great ideas for what they're looking for, but also what aspects they want to keep the same in our programming and areas for growth as well when the new person comes in, that we would share that information with the new person. Last week we met a couple days for a few hours and we established the vision, worked on interview questions, and also started to review all the candidates. And so as of today, we have 20 who have applied, and we're moving forward with our interviews. We've selected some to interview this week, so we have interviews set up virtually as we did for the memorial position. We have it virtually the next 3 nights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And if we're also keeping it open, because now is a time of the year when we have a lot of flux in these positions. There are a lot of other openings, and we want to make sure that we don't want to miss any opportunities of people who are out there. So we will plan to interview in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll have our final candidates that will push forward to Joe for another round of interviews.
Okay. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you.
All right, new business. NIPMA class of 2020 graduation and end of year celebrations.
Okay.
John Clements and Marianne Moran.
Yeah, just kind of as a background, probably one of the things that I get asked most frequently, and I think is this major piece of unfinished business, and something that we really have to grapple with, is what is the end of the year going to look like in light of still the restrictions, the stay-at-home restrictions, but also, even once those are eased, the social distancing requirements. So I've asked John and Marianne to kind of talk about the work that they've done with regard to starting to develop a plan, a specific plan and timeline for giving the class of 2020 the celebration that they so richly deserve. And I really want to note, and I want to commend John and Marianne, because I think they've been super thoughtful, super deliberate, and have really worked hard to involve all stakeholders in a meaningful way. So I'm going to turn it over to John and Marianne, and kind of, if they could talk about the process and kind of the timeline and some of their thinking that has gone into the tentative plans.
Appreciate that, Joe. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you, even virtually. Thanks for that comment, Joe. I would say, though, and Marianne be the first to join me in this, and that we've had a ton of support in putting some plans together for our seniors, and I think you said it well. We're looking to give them the celebration that they deserve. I think we've all been impacted by the closure of school, but I think no group more significantly than our seniors. So we're looking for a way to celebrate them. We know it's not the end of senior year that they imagined, but we realize too we've got a community rallying around these kids, and through a collaborative effort, we're glad to have some plans to put forward. We really wanted to be sure that the plans we had were reflective of the kids and that parents had input too. So we tried to find some forums where we could gain that feedback. We did a survey back on April 17th, and then another survey back on April 30th, kind of to get the key ideas of what was important for people and to pick out some of the key themes. And then to take that information and to process it with our group of officers and advisors. And the themes that came out were pretty clear. One of the things that we noted right away was that a virtual graduation was not the preference of our community. We had, I think, 73% of parents say they did not want a virtual graduation, and more than 90% of our students said they did not want a virtual graduation. They also provided a lot of creative ideas that we checked out and looked into, and then tried to take the key themes with the help of our senior officers and advisors and come up with the plan that we put together. So we know it's not what we envisioned, but we're excited about having some opportunities coming forward to celebrate together. We're obviously recognizing that we don't know yet what the rest of the summer is going to look like, but we are holding out hope for some face-to-face celebrations, and we put together a plan that will go through that will allow for some of that. Some of it started this past Friday with our teachers and staff members getting together to deliver the signs out to students. So we delivered more than 100 signs, which was really exciting. And I have to tell you, when we put this out to the faculty to see if they wanted to support this and be part of the sign-up process, it was filled up and signed up in a matter of minutes. And so many teachers went out. They painted their cars, they had balloons, they had signs, they were honking their horns. And I think we as a staff and faculty were as excited as the kids were to get out and see them. We missed seeing them. So it started there, and it's going to be continuing with some other events. Mrs. Moran is now sharing the screen. We won't give every detail, but we'll pick out some of the highlights. We know that coming up on Tuesday, May 26th, once our seniors have celebrated their last day of school, virtual or otherwise, we're going to have our senior parade with the help of Officer Ambrosino and Officer Senko, our 2 resource officers, where we will start at Misco and make our way from Misco to Clough to Memorial and then back to Nipmuc, where we will end the parade, with hopes that the social distancing guidelines are a little bit relieved over the coming days. All the teachers are going to be invited to come out and sort of line the driveways of the school where they can cheer on the students. So it's a little bit of a combination of the senior walk. That's that new tradition that we've had where kids go back to the schools where they began their journey. The teachers will be out there celebrating them. And if we can too, we're going to have people who live in town along the parade route kind of come out and cheer on our kids, which should be great. When they make their way back to Nipmuc, our faculty will be there and they'll do that ceremonial loop around the school parking lot, honking their horns, making noise, and celebrating safely with Officer Ambrosino watching over to make sure that it goes well. And then they'll also have a chance to pick up their caps and their yearbooks. A request that we have had for years is for students to be able to decorate their caps at graduation. And this is, I think, my 17th year as an administrator. I've always sort of held off on that, feeling like graduation is a very formal event and also wanted to keep the emphasis on the class and not as individuals. But when we talked about it with our officers this year, we really felt like this was the year to allow the cap decoration too. So we're excited for our kids to be able to have that opportunity. We know they don't have every tradition that we've had, but maybe they're also going to be starting some new traditions this time around.
And then at the bottom of the blog, it's probably the easiest way to look at it. So then it was really looking at kind of that senior week and graduation, which are important to our community, but critically important to our students as well. So not knowing what the guidance of the governor and state and local officials was going to be, we put together 3 options for our seniors. First option being in July. So we have a July option. The first August option, which is option 2, mirrors very much what happens in July, just at a later date. So we tried to put together a week for the students, and these are built off of student ideas of ways that they could come together and celebrate. So you'll see that first day, Tuesday, July 14th, putting together a senior breakfast. The kids requested a formal last day of school. I jokingly said to seniors, I think it's the only time I've ever had a request from seniors to come back to school. But they want to come back to school, so we want to honor that and bring our teachers back in so that they can kind of have that last day that they didn't get to have when school was cut short on them. So we'll welcome our teachers back and they can travel those halls with their classmates, visit with teachers, get their yearbook signed, et cetera, and then have a tie-dyeing event after that. Obviously, graduation rehearsal in there. They're looking to have a senior barbecue and want that to be open to parents and families as well. So a way to celebrate. Traditionally, we have had a senior night held on the Wednesday before graduation, which allows students and families to come together and celebrate together. So this will be held kind of as a similar event. And then seniors really wanted a prom of whatever version they can have of that. So they're looking at potential outside locations or at Nipmuc about bringing their class together, getting dressed up in a formal way one last time. So they'll be working on those plans. And then graduation is tentatively planned for July 18th, and outside, it will be our first outdoor graduation, which we're excited about, on the front athletic field. So holding on to as many of the traditions that we can hold on to that we've always had during indoor graduations, just moving the venue to outside in hopes that we can provide additional area for social distancing. So we would have some tents set up if heat was a concern, to be sure that we could accommodate anyone who would need those, and obviously handicap seating, but again, spreading people out over the field to allow distancing between families if we needed that. And then a rain date on the Sunday. So we would make a call that week based on the weather, whether graduation would be the Saturday or the Sunday. Option 2 is exactly the same as option 1, all of those details that we just outlined, with the exception that it happens in August. So we push that graduation date out until August 8th, allowing that senior week to happen that first week in August with the rain date of August 9th. So obviously these are pending state and local health and safety guidelines, but we're hopeful that we will get to either celebrate in option 1 or option 2, but have put out an option 3 as well.
Jump in before you go to option
Sure, go ahead.
3, Mary Ann. One of the things that we really liked about the senior week celebrations that the officers in particular suggested is how much it kind of celebrates the students being together, and you see that on the last day of the school and the tie-dye and the barbecue. We're glad we have a family event. And that carried over to prom too, with the idea that typically the prom is open to our juniors and seniors, and outside guests are allowed. But for this event, and we talked about it at length, one of the ideas was to make it available only for the members of the class of 2020, which is their sort of last dance together. It's right before graduation, and sort of culminates with a class-only event, which we think is a nice way to sort of have a last celebration before graduation. Sorry to interrupt you, Marianne.
No, thank you, thank you. So option 3, like I said, our hope is option 1 or option 2, but if those aren't possible, to go with an option 3, which would be looking at individual or small group graduations, obviously based on the guidelines put forth by the governor. So whether that was gatherings of 250 or more, or whether we were still under guidelines that it was, groups of 10 or less, we would work within whatever those guidelines were to honor small groups or individuals with their diplomas and make that day as special as possible for our students. So you don't see a lot of details there. Our hope is that we don't have to get to option 3, but should it be looking like we would need to further detail out option 3, we would work with class officers and advisors and families as well to determine how to best celebrate our students should option 3 need to be the option that we go with.
And just to throw in one more thing, which was pretty cool to add to this, it's not the biggest celebration, but we had one more thing come up on Friday afternoon where it was about 4:15. Marianne and I were just wrapping up for the day, and we got an email from the Department of Education that said, John and Marianne, I don't know if you know about this thing, but on May 16th, there's a Graduate Together event, and it's hosted by the LeBron James Foundation, and President Obama is giving a commencement speech out to the nation, to all of the class of 2020 across the U.S. And part of it is that each Commissioner of Education gets to record a 2-minute message out to students, and they get to highlight one school that is continuing to work and make progress during the time of remote learning. So they reached out and said, if Nipmuc wanted to be that school, we'd be thrilled to have you represent Massachusetts. So we said, absolutely. And then she said, your deadline is in about 3.5 hours. So Marianne and I spent Friday night putting together a video tribute that we just put out in our newsletter to families this afternoon. But it was a 2-minute message where we got to, and we were really grateful for this. We got a chance to say thank you to teachers and parents and students, and talk about the fact that although this is an extremely trying time, our students have really risen to the challenge, and there's a lot to celebrate. And we got to wish them all well. So it was a real honor for us to be able to record that. We don't know if it'll end up on the website for the event, or if you're watching channels 4, 5, and 7, you'll see it on a national broadcast. We were pretty excited about it.
Cool.
Excellent. Are there any questions about the tentative plans?
Sounds
No,
like there's
but
a
I'll
lot
comment that it was a very good video, especially under a tight deadline.
Yeah.
Oh, you saw the video, Vicki?
I did.
I can't wait to see that. All right, so let's move on to correspondence. Do we have any correspondence?
We do not have any correspondence.
Next is other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting. Any of those? Seeing none, The future agenda items, updates relative to the MERSD FY21 budget will be discussed on June 21st, or I'm sorry, June 1st. I misspoke. At this time, we'd like to roll call to executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, exemption number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the negotiations with the district's labor associations, because doing so in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session. Thank you, everyone.
Roll call?
Roll call.
Oh, sorry, we need to roll call. I always forget points of order. Thank you very much. Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Bill Desutter, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
You know what it was? It was reading that long paragraph. It just completely set my mind.
Throws you for a loop every time.
Thanks, everybody.